I assumed letting my sister crash for 3 weeks was just a favor, until my key stopped working in my own front door. My father called immediately, barking that I had to support her whether I liked it or not. I realized then that this was not a request for help, but a hostile takeover. They had no idea that while they celebrated in my living room, I had already set a trap that would cost them everything the very moment they felt safe. My name is Harper Parker, and for 32 years, I existed as a supporting character in the chaotic screenplay of my family. I was the reliable one, the steady hand, the person who kept the books balanced and the lights on while the stars of the show consumed all the oxygen in the room. But tonight, standing in the dining room of the house I had bought with my own money, I decided to rewrite the script. The silence in the room was not empty. It was heavy, like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. It smelled of expensive cologne and stale tension. My father, Gordon Parker, stood at the head of my mahogany dining table. His face was a shade of crimson that I had learned to associate with imminent explosions since I was 6 years old. He looked massive, a titan of industry in his own mind, accustomed to the world bending to his will because he signed the paychecks. He slammed his hand down on the table. The impact was violent. The silverware jumped. The crystal water glasses shivered. "If you do not take care of your sister," he shouted, his voice booming off the walls I had painted myself, "then you can forget about stepping foot in the company ever again. I am serious. Harper, you are done." I watched him. I did not flinch. Years ago, that tone would have sent me scrambling to apologize, to fix whatever imaginary problem he had concocted. Tonight, however, I just observed him. I saw the vein pulsing in his neck. I saw the desperation masked as authority. He was not a father asking a daughter for a favor. He was a CEO issuing a mandate to a subordinate he considered property. To my left, my sister Brittany lounged on my beige sofa. She was 36 years old, 4 years my senior, yet she occupied space like a petulant teenager. She held a glass of my best Pinot Noir, swirling the dark liquid around as if she were bored by the performance. She had divorced her wealthy husband 3 months ago, and since then, she had treated my life like a waiting room for her next adventure. She looked at me with half-lidded eyes, a smirk playing on her lips. She knew the routine. Dad yells, Harper folds, Brittany wins. It was a play they had rehearsed 1,000 times. Gordon pointed a finger at me, the gold signet ring on his pinky catching the light from the chandelier. "Are you listening to me?" he demanded. "Brittany stays here. You pay her bills until she gets back on her feet. That is final. If you have a problem with that, you can pack your desk at Northline Furnishings by Monday morning. Do not test me. Harper, I made you. I can break you." The threat hung in the air. Northline Furnishings Group, the family business. I had given that company my 20s. I had sacrificed relationships, weekends, and my sanity to modernize our logistics and rebrand our image. Gordon took the credit, but I did the work. He thought the job was the leash he held around my neck. He thought it was the only thing that kept me tethered to this dysfunction. He was wrong. I took a breath. It was slow and controlled. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I could hear the distant sound of a car passing on the street in Raleigh. I looked at Brittany, who took a slow sip of wine, her eyes daring me to speak. She looked comfortable. She looked permanent. She had already mentally measured the drapes for replacement. I looked back at Gordon. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I simply let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable for them. Then I spoke. "You are right," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Devoid of the tremor that usually accompanied our confrontations, it sounded like the voice of a stranger who was not afraid. Gordon blinked, confused by the lack of resistance. "I am glad you finally understand your duty," he huffed, adjusting his blazer. I continued, keeping my eyes locked on his. "I said you are right because I cannot work for Northline anymore. In fact, I resigned effective immediately via email 5 minutes before you walked through that door." The room went still. Brittany paused mid-swirl. Gordon's mouth opened slightly. But no sound came out. And, I added, keeping my tone conversational, almost light, tomorrow morning I start my new position as the Vice President of Operations for Cobalt Harbor Strategies. I let the name hang there. Cobalt Harbor Strategies was not a local furniture store. It was a massive firm based in Seattle. It was the major leagues. I am moving to Seattle, I said. My flight leaves at 6 in the morning. For a second, nobody moved. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked loudly. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, then Brittany laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound. She sat up, setting the wine glass down on the coffee table without using a coaster. "Oh, please," she scoffed, rolling her eyes. "You are bluffing. You would never leave Raleigh. You are too scared to leave." "Seattle? You have never even been to the West Coast. Stop being dramatic." "Harper, it is pathetic." She turned to our father. "Dad, she is just trying to scare you. She wants you to beg. Don't fall for it." Gordon's face went from red to a mottled purple. He stepped closer to me, invading my personal space. "You are lying," he growled. "You are ungrateful. You think you can threaten me? You think you can walk away from this family? You have responsibilities here. You have a sister who needs you." I did not step back. I stood my ground. The fear I expected to feel was absent. Instead, there was just a cold, hard resolve. "I am not bluffing," I said softly. I reached into the pocket of my blazer. My fingers brushed against the cold metal of the object inside. I pulled it out. It was a single silver key on a plain ring. It was the key to the front door, the key to the house I had spent 3 years renovating, the house Brittany had slowly been colonizing for the past 12 weeks. I looked at the key for a moment. It represented security. It represented achievement. But lately, it had just represented a cage. I dropped the key onto the mahogany table. It hit the wood with a dull thud that sounded louder than a gunshot. Brittany stopped laughing. Her eyes narrowed, focusing on the metal on the table. "What is that?" she asked, her voice losing some of its arrogance. "That is the key," I said. Gordon stared at it, then up at me. "You can keep the house key." "Harper, stop this theatrics. We are staying right here until you agree to the terms." I shook my head slowly. "No," I said, "you do not understand. That is not my key anymore." I took a step back, creating distance between myself and the table. "I sold the house," I said. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum. It sucked the air out of the room. Brittany's face went slack. Gordon froze, his hand halfway raised to point at me again. "What?" Brittany whispered. "I sold the house," I repeated, enunciating every word. "We close in 48 hours. But since you two seem so comfortable here, I decided to hand over possession early to the new owners. They take full legal possession tomorrow at noon. I checked the watch on my wrist. That gives you roughly 14 hours to get your things out." Gordon looked like he had been struck by lightning. You cannot sell this house," he stammered. "It is your house." "Exactly," I said. "It was my house. My name was on the deed. My name was on the mortgage. And my signature was on the closing documents I signed this morning." Brittany stood up now, the wine forgotten. But I live here," she screeched, her voice rising to a panic. "Where am I supposed to go? You cannot just kick me out. Dad, do something." Gordon turned to me, his eyes wide with shock and fury. "Harper, undo this. Right now. Call the agent. Cancel the sale. It is a done deal." "Dad," I said, "the money has already been wired. It is in an offshore account that you cannot touch." I looked around the room one last time. I looked at the art on the walls that Brittany had criticized. I looked at the rug she had spilled coffee on and never cleaned. I looked at the dining table where my father was currently leaning for support. Looking suddenly older and smaller. They were not family. They were parasites, and I had just burned the host. I picked up my purse from the chair. I did not have a suitcase with me. My bags were already in the trunk of my car, packed while they were out at a brunch I was not invited to. "Harper," Gordon roared, finding his voice again. If you walk out that door, you are dead to me. Do you hear me? I will ruin you." I paused at the archway leading to the foyer. I turned back one last time. I looked at Brittany, who was now trembling, realizing that her free ride had just evaporated. I looked at Gordon, whose power was dissolving in real time. "You told me I had to take care of her," I said. I gestured to the house around us. "I am taking care of myself." And with that, I turned around. "Harper!" Brittany screamed. "Harper, come back here!" I walked to the front door. I did not rush. I opened it and stepped out into the humid North Carolina night. The air hit my face, thick and warm, but it felt cleaner than the air inside. I closed the door behind me. I did not lock it. I did not have a key anymore. I walked down the driveway to where my sedan was parked under the street lamp. My legs felt strange, light and heavy at the same time. My hands were shaking. I held them up in front of me and watched the tremors. It was adrenaline. It was terror. It was the physical reaction to detonating a nuclear bomb in the center of my own life. I got into the driver's seat and closed the door. The sound of the world outside was muffled. I looked back at the house. I could see the silhouette of my father in the dining room window, waving his arms. I could see Brittany pacing in the living room. They were panic-stricken. They were furious. They were scrambling. For the first time in my life, their chaos was not my problem. I put the car in gear. The engine purred, a sound of readiness. I did not look back as I pulled away from the curb. I did not look back as I drove out of the subdivision. I kept my eyes fixed on the road ahead, the headlights cutting through the darkness. I was Harper Parker. I was 32 years old. And for the first time in my life, I was free. But as I merged onto the highway, heading toward the airport hotel, where I would spend my final few hours in this city, a small, cold smile touched my lips. They thought this was just me running away. They thought this was a tantrum. They thought the sale of the house was the worst thing that was going to happen to them. They were wrong. Selling the house was just the opening move. They had no idea what I had left behind for them. They had no idea that while they were screaming at an empty room, the real clock was already ticking down on something much, much worse. I turned on the radio. Music filled the car. I drove into the night, leaving the wreckage in my rearview mirror, ready to watch it burn from 3,000 miles away, to understand why I burned my life to the ground. You have to understand what it looked like 3 months ago. It was not a life of chaos. It was a life of meticulous, curated order. It was boring. And looking back now, I realized that boring was the greatest luxury I ever owned. 3 months ago, I was the invisible engine keeping Northline Furnishings Group from running off the rails. My father, Gordon, liked to play the role of the visionary CEO, the man who shook hands at trade shows in High Point and Las Vegas, drinking scotch and telling war stories about the furniture business. But back in Raleigh, I was the one in the trenches. My official title was Director of Brand Strategy and Operations. But in reality, I was the crisis manager. I was the one dealing with supply chain bottlenecks when the timber shipments from Vietnam got delayed. I was the one soothing angry vendors when our accounts payable department, which Gordon insisted on micromanaging, missed an invoice deadline. I was the one who made sure the lights stayed on and the reputation of the Parker family remained polished, even as the wood underneath was beginning to rot. I liked the work, or rather, I liked the control it gave me. I could fix a broken logistics chain. I could smooth over a PR mistake. I could solve problems that had logic and rules. My house was the physical manifestation of that need for order. It was a 3-bedroom craftsman bungalow in a historic district of Raleigh. I had bought it as a fixer-upper 4 years ago and restored it inch by inch, every Saturday. I was there with sandpaper and varnish. Every Sunday, I was gardening. It was not just a house. It was my sanctuary. It was the one place on earth where Gordon Parker's voice did not echo off the walls. It was quiet. It smelled of lemon polish and eucalyptus. The throw pillows were always karate chopped in the center. The coasters were always in their stack. It was a Tuesday night in October when the piece ended. I had gone to bed early, around 10 o'clock, exhausted after a 12-hour day dealing with a recall on a line of cribs. I was deep in a dreamless sleep when the vibration of my phone against the nightstand dragged me back to consciousness. I fumbled for the device in the dark, squinting at the screen. The clock read 12:14 in the morning. The name on the screen was Brittany. My stomach dropped. Brittany never called at midnight to ask how my day was. Brittany called at midnight because there was a fire, and she usually expected me to bring the water. I slid my thumb across the screen and put the phone to my ear. "Hello?" I rasped, my voice thick with sleep. There was no greeting. There was only the sound of jagged, hyperventilating sobbing. It was a sound I knew well. It was the sound of Brittany wanting something. "He kicked me out," she wailed. The sound was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "Harper, he actually kicked me out." I sat up, rubbing my eyes, trying to switch my brain from sleep mode to crisis mode. "Who? Who kicked you out?" "Derek!" she screamed. Her husband, or rather, her husband of 5 months. Derek was an investment banker with a penthouse in Charlotte and a patience level that I had always suspected was finite. He threw my bags in the hallway. "Harper, he called security. He said he is done." I turned on the bedside lamp, blinking against the sudden yellow light. "Okay, Brittany, calm down, breathe. Why did he kick you out? What happened?" I already knew it was not nothing. You do not evict your wife at midnight for nothing. "We had a little fight," she sniffled, her voice dropping to that wounded, innocent tone she perfected in high school. "Just a stupid argument about money. He is so controlling." "Harper, he tracks everything I spend. I bought a few things for the apartment, just to make it feel like home. And he blew up. He said I maxed out the emergency card. He called me a parasite." Can you believe that? I could believe that. I knew for a fact that Brittany's definition of a few things usually involved designer handbags and limited edition art pieces that she lost interest in a week later. "Where are you now?" I asked, swinging my legs out of bed. "I am in the car," she sobbed. "I have been driving for 2 hours. I am almost in Raleigh." A cold feeling washed over me. She was not calling for sympathy. She was calling for a landing strip. "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Go to Dad's house. He is in town. He has the guest suite." "No!" She cut me off, the sobbing vanishing instantly, replaced by a sharp, demanding edge. "I cannot go to Dad's. You know how he gets. He will lecture me. He will side with Derek. I cannot deal with that right now. I am traumatized." "Harper!" I rubbed my temples. "Okay, then go to the Marriott on Fayetteville Street. I will call and put it on my card for tonight. We can figure this out in the morning." There was a pause on the other end of the line, a heavy, judgmental silence. "I am not staying in a hotel." "Harper," she said, her voice low and icy. "I am your sister. I just got divorced. My life is falling apart. And you want to send me to a hotel like I am some stranger? It is 1 a.m. Brittany," I said, feeling my boundaries starting to crumble but trying to hold on. "I have a presentation at 8. Dad said your house is huge." She interrupted. The words hit me like a physical slap. Dad said, "Of course." She had called him first. He had probably told her to come to me because he did not want to deal with the drama at midnight either. He had deflected the missile toward my coordinates. "Dad said you have 3 bedrooms and you live alone," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "He said there is plenty of room and that you would want to help. He said family takes care of family." My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white. "My house. My quiet, clean, peaceful house. Brittany," I said, desperation creeping into my voice. "Dad is renovating his kitchen. That is why he sent you to me. But my house it is small. I work from home sometimes. I need the space." "You are lying," she spat. "Dad is not renovating. He just does not want me there. And now you do not want me there either. You are both so selfish." Selfish. The magic word. The word that had been used to control me since I was a child. If I wanted to read instead of play with Brittany, I was selfish. If I wanted to go to a state college instead of the expensive private school where my father could brag about me, I was selfish. I closed my eyes. I could feel the trap snapping shut. "Look," I said, trying one last time to negotiate with a terrorist. "You can stay for a few days, maybe a week, until you find a new place." "A week?" She scoffed. "Harper, I have nowhere to go. Derek froze the accounts. I have nothing. I need time to heal. I need my sister." She started crying again, but this time it was softer. It was the pitiful, broken bird act that she knew tore my heart out. "Are you really going to make me sleep in my car?" she whispered. "After everything that happened tonight? Are you really that heartless?" I sat there in the silence of my bedroom. I looked at the pristine hardwood floors. I looked at the stack of books on my nightstand, arranged by height. I looked at the sanctuary I had built to keep the chaos out, and I knew I was about to lose it. "Fine," I said. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. "You can come here." "Oh, thank God," she breathed. The relief audible. "You are the best. Harper, I knew I could count on you. I am 10 minutes away. Leave the front door unlocked." "But Brittany," I said, my voice hardening slightly. "We need to set some ground rules. This is temporary, a few weeks, maximum. And I have work in the morning. So—" "I will be quiet as a mouse," she promised, already sounding distracted, probably checking her makeup in the rearview mirror. "You won't even know I'm there. See you soon. Sis, love you." The line went dead. I lowered the phone from my ear. The screen was dark, but the device felt hot in my palm. I sat there for a long time, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun in slow, rhythmic circles. I should have felt like a good sister. I should have felt virtuous for helping a family member in crisis, but I did not feel virtuous. I felt a click. It was a distinct sensation in the back of my mind. It was the sound of a lock engaging, but I was on the wrong side of the door. It was a deep, primal intuition that screamed that I had just made a catastrophic error. I had not just invited a guest into my home. I had invited a demolition crew. I stood up and walked out of my bedroom, moving through the silent hallway to the living room. Everything was perfect. The moonlight streamed in through the sheer curtains, illuminating the dust-free surfaces. The air was still. I knew, with a sinking certainty, that this was the last time I would see my house like this. I walked to the front door and unlocked it. The bolt slid back with a smooth, well-oiled, heavy sound. I opened the door a crack, just enough to break the seal of my sanctuary. 10 minutes later, headlights swept across the living room wall. I heard the crunch of tires on my gravel driveway, but it did not sound like a car. It sounded heavier. It sounded like a truck. I went to the window and looked out. It was not just Brittany's sedan. Behind her sleek convertible, a large moving van was backing into my driveway, its reverse beeper cutting through the neighborhood silence like a countdown. Beep, beep, beep. She had not just packed a bag. She had packed everything. She had not come to visit. She had come to invade. I stood by the window, my hand resting on the cool glass. I watched as Brittany hopped out of her car, looking radiant and energized, pointing directions to the driver of the moving van. She looked nothing like a woman who had been sobbing 5 minutes ago. She looked like a general surveying new territory. I realized then that the fight with Derek might have happened tonight, but this move had been planned. She had called Dad. She had organized a mover. She had targeted me. "Why me?" I whispered to the empty room, but I knew the answer. I was the one who always said yes. I was the one who fixed things. I was the one who absorbed the impact so everyone else could stay whole. I turned away from the window as the first heavy footsteps thudded onto my porch. I took a deep breath, trying to steel myself for the whirlwind that was about to blow through my front door. I told myself I could handle it. I told myself it was just family. I told myself I could maintain control. I was wrong about all of it. The door swung open, and Brittany breezed in, bringing with her a gust of humid night air and the overwhelming scent of expensive perfume. She dropped a Louis Vuitton key pouch on my entryway table, scratching the wood, and spread her arms wide. "Home sweet home," she announced. Beaming at me, I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Welcome," I said. And just like that, the invasion began. I did not know it then, but standing there in my pajamas, watching movers haul a leopard print chaise lounge into my minimalist living room, I was looking at the end of my life as I knew it. The clock had started ticking, but I was the only one who didn't know the time of death was already set. The morning Brittany arrived to officially move in. I stood on my front porch, holding a cup of lukewarm coffee, watching my quiet, respectable suburban life get run over by a semi-truck. When she had said she was coming over, I had envisioned her convertible with maybe 2 large suitcases and a garment bag. I had expected a guest. What pulled into my cul-de-sac at 10 in the morning was not a guest. It was a commercial moving van, the kind you hire when you are relocating a corporate headquarters or a small circus. It was massive, loud, and it parked diagonally across the street, effectively blocking the driveways of both Mrs. Higgins and the Thompson family. I watched Mrs. Higgins peek through her blinds, her face a mask of judgment. I waved weakly. She did not wave back. The ramp of the truck slammed down with a metallic crash that echoed through the neighborhood. A team of 3 movers, who looked like they had been promised a very large tip that I knew Brittany did not have, began marching toward my front door. They were not carrying essentials. They were carrying an empire of cardboard. I stepped back into my entryway, trying to make space, but it was like trying to hold back the tide with a spoon. Within 20 minutes, my foyer, my carefully curated, minimalist foyer with its single console table and vase of dried lavender, was gone. In its place was a fortress of boxes. And not just any boxes. These were glossy, labeled with thick black marker in Brittany's loopy handwriting. Winter boots, Prada only. Evening bags, 2022 to 2023, skincare reserves, and miscellaneous awards, high school. There were stacks of shoeboxes that rose like skyscrapers on either side of the hallway, creating a narrow, precarious canyon that I had to squeeze through sideways. Brittany emerged from her convertible moments later. She wore oversized sunglasses and a silk caftan that billowed in the wind, looking like she was arriving at a resort in the Mediterranean rather than her younger sister's 3-bedroom bungalow in North Carolina. She walked up the driveway, stepping over a stray piece of packing tape, and stopped at the threshold. She lowered her sunglasses and looked around. Her gaze swept over my living room, my dining area, and the glimpse of the kitchen beyond. She did not smile. She did not say thank you. "Is this it?" she asked. I blinked, confused. "Is this what?" "The whole house," she clarified, stepping inside and wrinkling her nose. "I mean, I know you said it was small, Harper, but I thought you were being modest. This is compact. It is 1,800 square feet. Brittany," I said, my defensive reflex kicking in, "it is plenty of space for one person." "Right," she said, dragging out the word, "for one person. But there are 2 of us now." She walked past me, trailing a scent of jasmine and entitlement. She ran a finger along the edge of my dining table. "And the light." She sighed. "It is so aggressive. Do you not have dimmers? It feels like an interrogation room in here." "And what is that smell?" I sniffed the air. "It is lemon oil. I just polished the floors." "It smells like a hospital," she declared. "Or a library. It smells like boredom. Harper, we need to get some diffusers, something with patchouli or sandalwood, to cleanse the energy." She marched toward the hallway, her heels clicking loudly on the hardwood. I followed her, feeling like a tour guide in my own home who was failing a surprise inspection. She stopped in front of the master bedroom door, which I had closed. She turned the handle. "That is my room," I said quickly. Stepping forward, she pushed the door open anyway and peeked inside. She took in the king-sized bed, the ensuite bathroom, and the walk-in closet. She nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. "This will work." "What will work?" I asked, feeling a tightness in my chest. "I will take this room," she said. turning to face me with a matter-of-fact expression. I have a lot more clothes than you. Obviously. And with the divorce trauma, I really need the ensuite. I need a bathtub for my stress soaks. You know how I get when I'm stressed. My skin breaks out. I stared at her. I actually laughed. A short, sharp sound of disbelief. No, I said. Brittany looked at me as if I had spoken in a foreign language. Excuse me? I said no. I repeated, my voice firm. This is my house. Brittany, I pay the mortgage. I pay the utilities. That is my bedroom. You are staying in the guest room down the hall. It has a queen bed and a very nice closet. The hall bathroom is yours. Brittany's face darkened. The playful, critical guest persona vanished, replaced by the wounded victim. Harper, she whined, her voice rising an octave. Are you serious? You are going to make me walk down the hall to pee in the middle of the night? I am going through the hardest time of my life. My husband just threw me away. And you cannot even give me the big room? God, you are so rigid. You have always been so rigid. I crossed my arms. The guest room. Brittany, or the Marriott. She stared at me for a full 5 seconds, testing my resolve. When she saw I was not going to budge, she let out a huff of pure, childish petulance. Fine, she snapped. Keep your precious room. I hope you enjoy it while your sister suffers in a closet. She spun around, walked to the guest room door, and slammed it shut. The sound vibrated through the floorboards. I stood there in the hallway, surrounded by her towers of shoeboxes, and listened. From behind the closed door, I could hear her talking on the phone, her voice muffled but angry. She was probably calling Dad. She was probably telling him I was abusing her. I walked back to the kitchen to finish my coffee, but it was cold. I poured it down the sink. That was the first hour. By the third day, the invasion had moved from physical space to psychological warfare. I came home from work on Wednesday to find that my living room had been rearranged. My gray sectional sofa, which I had positioned to face the fireplace, was now pushed against the far wall. My coffee table was draped in a bright pink scarf, and in the corner, where my reading chair used to be, stood a massive, terrifyingly ugly floor lamp with feathers on the shade. Brittany was lounging on the sofa, eating grapes. I moved things around. She announced before I could speak. The feng shui was terrible. All the energy was flowing out the window. This traps the qi. You trap the qi by blocking the walkway? I asked, dropping my keys on the counter. Do not be sarcastic, she said. I am trying to help. Your style is very sterile. I am adding flavor. I walked to the kitchen to start dinner. I opened the refrigerator and froze. My meal prep containers, neat stacks of grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, and quinoa that I had prepared on Sunday for the entire week, were gone. In their place sat 3 bottles of champagne, a jar of artisanal olives, a wheel of brie the size of a tire, and a box of chocolate truffles. Brittany, I called out, trying to keep the scream inside my throat. Where is my food? Oh, that stuff in the plastic tubs? She shouted back from the living room. I threw it out. It looked old. Plus, I needed room for my essentials. It was made on Sunday, I yelled, slamming the fridge door. And champagne is not an essential food group. It is when you are grieving, she retorted. I breathed in through my nose and out through my mouth. I walked into the living room. She had installed a Bluetooth speaker system on my mantel, right next to a picture of our grandmother. It was thumping a low, repetitive bass beat that made my teeth ache. Turn it down, I said. She rolled her eyes but lowered the volume by a fraction. You are no fun. Harper, no fun at all. By the end of the week, the pattern was set. It was a routine designed to dismantle my sanity piece by piece. I would leave for work at 7:30 in the morning. Brittany would be asleep. The house silent. When I returned at 6 in the evening, the house would be transformed into a frat house for divorced socialites. She slept until noon. I knew this because the neighbors told me they saw her collecting the mail in her robe at 12:30. She spent her afternoons watching reality television marathons. Not the educational kind, the kind where women in ball gowns threw wine at each other. When I walked in the door on Friday, the sound of shouting women filled the house. Brittany was on the couch, surrounded by wrappers. But it was the kitchen that broke me. Every dish I owned seemed to be in the sink. Plates with dried egg yolk, wine glasses with lipstick stains on the rim, smoothie blenders caked with green sludge. It was a mountain of filth. "Brittany," I said, standing over the mess, "you have been home all day. You could not load the dishwasher?" She did not look up from the TV. "I am not a maid. Harper, I am a guest. Guests do not do dishes. Besides, the detergent hurts my manicure. I am not asking you to scrub the floors," I said, my voice shaking. "I am asking you to clean up after yourself. This is disgusting. You are so dramatic." She sighed, finally pausing the show. "I was going to do it later. Why do you have to nag the second you walk in the door? You sound exactly like Mom." She knew that would shut me up. She knew I hated being compared to our mother, a woman whose primary parenting technique had been passive-aggressive criticism. I washed the dishes. I washed them angrily, clanking the plates together, hoping one would break so I could scream. None of them broke. But the final straw, the moment I realized this was not just annoying, but dangerous, came on Sunday afternoon. I was looking for my spare set of car keys. I kept them on a hook by the back door, along with a spare house key that was meant for emergencies. The hook was empty. I searched the counter. I searched the drawers. Nothing. Brittany walked into the kitchen, wearing one of my silk robes that she had borrowed without asking. "Have you seen the spare keys?" I asked. "The ones on the little silver hook?" "Oh, yeah," she said casually, pouring herself a glass of water. I gave the house key to Tiffany. I froze. "Tiffany? Who is Tiffany?" "My nail tech," she said, taking a sip. "She's going to come over tomorrow while you are at work to give me a pedicure. I did not want to have to get up to let her in, so I just gave her the spare key yesterday when we met for lunch." I stared at her. My brain could not process the level of security breach I was hearing. "You gave a key? To my house? To a stranger?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "She is not a stranger." "Harper," Brittany scoffed. "She does my cuticles. She is practically family." "She has a key to my front door," I shouted, finally losing my temper. "Do you know where she lives? Do you know her last name?" Brittany rolled her eyes. "You are being paranoid. She is totally trustworthy. Stop acting like I gave the nuclear codes to a spy. It is just a key. She is coming over tomorrow?" I demanded. "Yes, around 1 o'clock," she said. "Get the key back." I said, "Get it back right now." "I cannot," Brittany said, shrugging. "It is Sunday. Her salon is closed. I will get it tomorrow." "God, you are so uptight. It is like living with a prison warden." She turned and walked out of the kitchen, trailing the silk belt of my robe behind her. I stood there, gripping the edge of the granite counter. I looked at the empty hook. I looked at the pile of dirty dishes she had already started generating for the day. I looked at the pink scarf on my coffee table. She had given away my security. She had taken over my space. She had disregarded every boundary I had tried to set. And she called me the warden. I realized then that she did not see herself as a guest. She saw herself as the new management. She had not just moved in. She was actively erasing me from my own home. I went to the front door and locked the deadbolt. I checked it twice, but it felt pointless. The enemy was already inside the gates, and she had just made copies of the keys for her friends. I walked into my bedroom, my one remaining sanctuary, and closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the wall. My breathing was shallow. My hands were clenched into fists. Dad had ordered me to take care of her. He had said, "You have to take care of her." I looked at my phone. I looked at the calendar app. It had been 1 week, just 1 week. If I let this continue, I realized there would be nothing left of me in a month. I would be a servant in my own house, paying the bills for a party I was not invited to. I stood up. I walked to the closet and pulled out a shoebox. Not one of Brittany's designer boxes, a plain, sturdy cardboard box. I put it under the bed. I did not know exactly what I was going to do yet, but as I listened to the bass from the living room start to thump again, rattling the picture frames on my dresser, I knew one thing for sure. I was not going to be the victim in this story. If Brittany wanted a war, she was going to get one. But she was fighting with noise and tantrums. I was going to fight with silence and strategy. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the muffled sound of my sister laughing at the television, oblivious to the fact that she had just pushed me past the point of no return. The click I had heard 3 months ago was gone. Now, I heard a ticking, and it was getting louder. The smell hit me before I even turned the knob. It was a Tuesday evening, a time that used to signify the quiet slide into the middle of the week. I had spent 10 hours at the office negotiating a contract for sustainable timber, a headache that had throbbed behind my eyes since noon. I wanted silence. I wanted a glass of water. I wanted to sit in my beige armchair and stare at a blank wall. But as I stood on my porch, the air wasn't smelling of the jasmine I had planted in the spring. It smelled of chemicals, sharp, stinging, industrial chemicals. It was the smell of a freshly opened can of paint, but stronger, more aggressive. It smelled like a headache given physical form. I unlocked the door and pushed it open. For a moment, I thought I had walked into the wrong house. My brain actually stuttered, trying to reconcile the memory of my home with the reality assaulting my retinas. My living room, which I had painstakingly painted a soothing, sophisticated shade of grayga, a perfect balance of gray and beige that caught the morning light just right, was gone. In its place was a violent, vibrating shade of electric purple. It was not a color found in nature. It was the color of a chemically flavored lollipop, or perhaps a warning sign in a nuclear facility. But it was not just purple. As I stepped closer, my heels sinking into the drop cloths that had been haphazardly thrown over my hardwood floors, I saw the glitter. The paint was infused with silver sparkles. The walls shimmered under the overhead lights like the backdrop of a cheap teenage music video. "Brittany?" I called out, my voice sounding hollow in the fume-filled room. There was no answer, but I could hear music thumping from the kitchen. I looked around the living room, trying to process the scale of the disaster. The walls were still wet. The smell was overwhelming. And then I noticed the empty spaces. My art was gone. I had spent 5 years collecting limited edition prints from local North Carolina artists. They were not masterpieces, but they were mine. They were tasteful, framed in minimal black wood, and they anchored the room. I ran to the garage door and threw it open. There they were. My prints were not stacked carefully. They were thrown into a pile next to the recycling bin, as if they were trash waiting for collection day. The glass on the top frame, a beautiful charcoal sketch of the Blue Ridge Mountains, was cracked. A jagged line ran right through the center of the artwork. The frame of another was chipped where it had hit the concrete floor. I stood there, staring at the broken glass, feeling a cold numbness spread through my fingers. This was not redecorating. This was erasure. She had removed the evidence of my taste, my personality, and replaced it with a neon nightmare. I closed the garage door, my hand trembling slightly, and walked toward the kitchen. The thumping bass got louder. Laughter drifted down the hallway. Not just Brittany's laughter. Strangers. I rounded the corner into the kitchen and stopped. There were 4 people I had never seen before in my life standing around my kitchen island. 2 men in tight t-shirts and 2 women who looked like carbon copies of Brittany. Bleached hair, heavy makeup, and holding glasses of wine. My glasses. They were using my Waterford crystal goblets, the ones my grandmother had left me, the ones I washed by hand and only used for Christmas dinner. One of the men was using a goblet to drink what looked like a mixture of tequila and energy drink. He was leaning back against my counter, and in his other hand, he held a lit cigarette. I watched, frozen in horror, as he tapped the ash. He did not look for an ashtray. He just tapped it directly onto my quartz countertop, a gray pile of filth on the pristine white surface. I have a strict no-smoking rule. I have never smoked a day in my life. The smell of smoke clings to curtains, to upholstery. It never leaves. Brittany was in the center of the group, holding court. She was wearing a sequined top that matched the new walls, looking flushed and manic. "Oh, look! The landlord is home!" she shouted when she saw me. throwing her hands up. Everyone! This is Harper. She is the one I told you about, the one who needs to loosen up. The strangers turned to look at me. They smirked. They did not look like guests in someone else's home. They looked like they belonged there, and I was the intruder interrupting their good time. "Brittany," I said, my voice cutting through the music. "Who are these people?" "Just some friends I met at the Pilates studio," she chirped, oblivious to the murder in my eyes. "And their boyfriends. We are celebrating." "Celebrating what?" I asked, walking further into the room. My shoes crunched on something sticky on the floor. I looked down. A puddle of something red had been spilled and left to dry. "Celebrating my new vibe." Brittany gestured to the purple walls visible through the archway. I decided the house needed a rebrand. It was too depressing. Now it pops. It is perfect for my live streams. I am going to start a lifestyle channel. Harper. Recovering with Brittany. It is going to be huge. I looked at the counter. Beside the pile of cigarette ash, there was a bottle of wine. The air left my lungs. It was a bottle of Chateau Margaux, vintage 2004. I had bought it 5 years ago with my first big bonus. It cost $600. I had kept it in a climate-controlled rack in the pantry, hidden in the back. I had told myself I would open it the day I made vice president. It was my symbol of the future. The bottle was open. It was 3/4 empty. One of the women was holding a plastic cup, a red Solo cup, and Brittany was tipping the bottle, pouring the velvety, complex, $600 wine into the plastic cup as if it were box wine from a grocery store. "Stop," I said. It wasn't a scream. It was a command. Brittany stopped pouring. A few drops of crimson liquid splashing onto the counter. "What?" "That wine," I said, pointing a shaking finger. "That is not for drinking," she laughed. "Wine is literally made for drinking." "Harper, don't be weird. It was just sitting in the pantry gathering dust. I thought I would put it to good use." She tipped the bottle again. I stepped forward and grabbed the neck of the bottle. I pulled it out of her hand. The movement was sudden enough that wine sloshed out, staining her sequined top. "Hey," she shrieked. "You ruined my shirt." "Get out," I said. I did not look at her. I looked at the man with the cigarette. "Get out of my house. Now." The man laughed, blowing smoke toward the ceiling. "Whoa. Calm down. Honey, we are just chilling." "I am not your honey," I said, turning my gaze on him. "I am the owner of this property, and if you are not out the front door in 2 minutes, I am calling the police and reporting a break-in. And since I have never met you, and you are destroying my property, they will arrest you." The room went quiet. The music seemed to stutter. "Harper, you are embarrassing me," Brittany hissed. I turned on her. "You embarrassed yourself when you painted my living room purple without asking me. You embarrassed yourself when you let strangers smoke in my kitchen." I looked back at the guests. 1 minute left. The man with the cigarette looked at my face. He saw something there that made him extinguish the cigarette in my sink, hissing against the stainless steel, and put down the crystal glass. "Let's go," he muttered to the others. "This chick is crazy." They shuffled out. They did not apologize. They grabbed their bags and trailed out of the kitchen, leaving behind the smell of stale tobacco and the wreckage of my evening. I heard the front door close. I stood alone in the kitchen with Brittany. She was leaning against the fridge, arms crossed, looking at me with pure venom. "You are such a killjoy," she spat. I was finally having a moment of happiness, finally feeling like myself again, and you had to ruin it. You are the fun police. "Harper, that is why you are single. That is why no one likes you." I looked at the open bottle of wine in my hand. It was ruined. The oxygen had been hitting it for hours. The symbol was broken. "You painted my walls." "Brittany," I said quietly, "you threw my art in the garage. You stole my wine." "It is just paint," she shouted. "I can paint it back if you are so obsessed with being boring." "And the wine? I will buy you another one when my settlement comes in. You are so petty about money." "It is not about the money," I said. "It is about respect." She stepped closer to me. Her face changed. The anger smoothed out into a cold, superior sneer. "Let's get something straight, little sister," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You think because your name is on the deed, you are the boss here. You think you can order me around." She poked me in the chest with a manicured fingernail. "But we both know the truth. Dad sent me here. Dad told you to take care of me. You are just the staff. Harper, you are the one who pays the bills and keeps the fridge stocked so the real Parkers can live their lives. So don't pretend you have any power. You are just the wallet." She held my gaze for a second longer, making sure the insult landed, then turned and walked out of the kitchen. "I am going to take a bath," she announced over her shoulder. "Don't disturb me. I need to wash off your negative energy." I stood there for a long time. I looked at the cigarette burn in the sink. I looked at the purple stain on the counter. I poured the rest of the Chateau Margaux down the drain. It looked like blood swirling away. I needed to wash my face. I needed to scrub the feeling of the day off my skin. I walked down the hall to the master bedroom. My bedroom. The one room I had managed to keep her out of. I opened the door and went into the ensuite bathroom. I stopped. The air was thick with steam. The mirror was fogged up, but it was the vanity counter that made my stomach turn. My cosmetics were scattered everywhere. I use a specific brand of face cream. It costs $300 a jar. I use it sparingly, a tiny dab each night. The jar was sitting open on the counter, the lid thrown carelessly to the side. The cream inside, usually pristine and white, had a deep gouge in it, as if someone had scooped it out with 3 fingers. It was drying out, a yellow crust forming on the top layer. My brushes, which I cleaned weekly, were caked with glittery eyeshadow that I did not own. My lipstick, a rare shade I had ordered from France, was lying on its side, the cap off, the tip smashed against the marble where it had been dropped. She had been here. She had come into my private bathroom, used my most personal, expensive things, and left them destroyed. She hadn't just used them. She had violated them. It was a message. It was a dog marking its territory. She was telling me that no door in this house could keep her out. She was telling me that nothing I owned was safe. She was telling me that my privacy was a privilege she had revoked. I did not cry. I wanted to, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, a cold clarity settled over me, heavier and more permanent than the anger. I walked back out to the living room. I sat down on the floor, right in the center of the room, ignoring the drop cloths. I looked at the walls, under the harsh overhead light. The purple paint seemed to pulse. It was ugly. It was aggressive. It was permanent. Brittany was right. This wasn't a visit. Guests don't paint walls. Guests don't throw away art. Guests don't tell you that you are just the staff in your own life. This was an occupation. She had taken the territory. She had installed her flag, and she had the backing of the superpower, my father. I sat there in the silence, the smell of paint fumes burning my throat, and I realized that waiting for her to leave was no longer a strategy. She was never going to leave, not as long as the house stood, not as long as I was making it comfortable for her. I looked at the purple wall, and for the first time, I didn't see a disaster. I saw a variable. I saw something that would make a potential buyer hesitate, or I saw something else. I closed my eyes and let the plan that had been forming in the back of my mind take a step forward. It was terrifying. It was nuclear. But looking at my ruined home, I realized I had nothing left to lose. They wanted this house? They wanted to control me? Fine. They could have the paint. They could have the wine. But they were not going to keep me. I stood up and walked to the garage to retrieve my broken art. I would fix the frames. I would tape the glass. And I would start packing. Not for a trip, but for a war. The notification hit my phone at 10:17 on a Thursday morning, vibrating against the desk with the persistence of a wasp. It was an automated alert from my bank. Transaction declined. Credit limit exceeded. I stared at the screen, blinking. That was impossible. The alert was for the supplementary credit card I had given Brittany 3 days ago. I had handed it to her with very specific instructions. This is for groceries and household essentials only. I had assumed, foolishly. that a limit of $5,000 would be more than enough to cover food for 2 people for a month. It had been 3 days. I logged into the banking app, my fingers flying across the screen. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I pulled up the transaction history, and what I saw made the blood drain from my face. There was not a single transaction at a grocery store. Monday, 2 p.m., $640 at Lumiere Med Spa. Monday, 4 p.m. $1,200 at Velvet Vine Boutique. Tuesday, 1 p.m. $350 at the Onyx Room, a steakhouse where a salad costs $30. Wednesday, a flurry of charges. Sephora, Nordstrom, a luxury pet store. Even though we did not own a pet, the final charge, the one that broke the limit and triggered the decline, was for $800 at a liquor store specializing in rare vintages. She had burned through $5,000 in 72 hours. I felt a cold, sharp clarity wash over me. This was not a misunderstanding. This was theft. I left work early. I did not care about the optics. I drove home, the printed bank statement sitting on the passenger seat like an indictment. When I walked into the house, Brittany was in the living room, the purple living room, surrounded by shopping bags. She was holding a new leather jacket up to the light, admiring the grain. "We need to talk," I said, dropping the statement onto the coffee table. Brittany glanced at the paper, then back at the jacket. "You are home early. Did you get fired?" I pointed at the paper. "You maxed out the card." "Brittany, $5,000? In 3 days?" She shrugged, not even bothering to look guilty. "Things add up. Harper, inflation is crazy right now." I picked up the paper and read from it. $1,200 for clothes? $600 for a facial? Is that inflation? Brittany? Or is that you stealing my money? She dropped the jacket and glared at me. "Stealing? That is a harsh word. You gave me the card. You said, 'Here, take care of yourself.' I said, 'Buy groceries,'" I shouted. "I did not say go on a shopping spree while I'm at work earning the money you are burning." She stood up, her face flushing pink. "I need to feel human. Harper, I just went through a divorce. I feel ugly. I feel old. I needed a facial. I needed some new clothes to feel confident again. Are you really going to begrudge me a little bit of happiness? You have a job. You have savings. You can afford it." I looked at her. I saw the absolute lack of remorse. She truly believed she was entitled to my labor. She believed my bank account was just an extension of her emotional support system. "I want the money back," I said, my voice low and steady. "You are going to return these clothes. You are going to pay me back for the spa and the dinners. Or you are getting out of my house. Tonight." Brittany laughed. It was a cruel, incredulous sound. "You are joking. I do not have any money. Derek froze everything, remember? Then get a job." I said, "Northline is hiring administrative assistants. Starbucks is hiring. I do not care. But you are not living here for free and robbing me blind." Brittany's eyes narrowed. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. She did not dial a friend. She hit speed dial number 1, Dad. She sobbed into the receiver before I could even blink. The transformation was instantaneous. Her face crumpled, tears springing to her eyes on command. "Dad, you have to help me. Harper is screaming at me." I stood there, stunned by the speed of the lie. "She is kicking me out," Brittany wailed, pacing the room. "I just bought some food because the fridge was empty. And she is waving the bill in my face, calling me a thief. She says I am a burden. She says I am useless. Dad, I am scared. She is being so aggressive." She paused, listening, then looked at me with a smirk that didn't match her teary voice. "Okay, Daddy, I will tell her. Love you." She hung up and tossed the phone onto the sofa. "Dad wants to see you at the office tomorrow morning," she said, her voice dry and bored again. "He said if you touch me or my things, he will cut you off." I did not sleep that night. I lay in bed, listening to the silence of the house, feeling the walls closing in. I knew I was right. I had the bank statement. I had the evidence. Surely, once Gordon saw the itemized list, the spa, the clothes, the alcohol, he would see reason. He was a businessman. He understood numbers. I went to work the next morning with a knot in my stomach the size of a fist. I sat at my desk, the bank statement in a crisp manila folder, waiting. At 9:30, the elevator doors opened. Gordon Parker did not walk into Northline Furnishings. He invaded it. He bypassed the receptionist without a nod. He walked past the sales team without a glance. He marched straight toward my department, his heavy footsteps thudding against the carpet. He was wearing his charcoal power suit, the one he wore when he was firing executives or closing mergers. I stood up as he approached, clutching the folder. "Dad, I have the proof right here. If you just look at the—" He did not look at the folder. He grabbed my upper arm. His grip was tight, painful. Conference room. He growled. "Now." He dragged me, literally pulled me, across the open-plan office. Heads turned. I saw the marketing manager lower her phone. I saw the interns exchange wide-eyed glances. My father, the CEO, was hauling his daughter, the director of operations, into the main conference room like a truant schoolchild. The conference room was a glass fishbowl in the center of the floor. It was designed for transparency. Today, it was designed for humiliation. Gordon shoved me inside and slammed the glass door. The sound vibrated through the room. He did not sit down. He stood over me, his face a mask of fury. "You ungrateful little brat," he hissed. "Dad, look at the statement." I pleaded, holding it out. "She spent $5,000 on clothes and spa treatments. She lied to you. She said it was food. Look at it." He slapped the folder out of my hand. Paper scattered across the floor. "I do not care," he shouted. "I do not care what she bought. She is your sister. She is in pain. And you are counting pennies? It is $5,000, I yelled back. "That is not pennies, and she is not in pain. She is exploiting me." Gordon leaned in close. I could smell the coffee on his breath. I could see the red veins in his eyes. "You listen to me. Harper, you are going to pay that bill. You are going to apologize to Brittany, and you are going to make sure she has whatever she needs." I shook my head, tears of frustration stinging my eyes. "No, I will not. I am done. She needs to leave." Gordon straightened up. He adjusted his cuffs. He looked out through the glass walls at the employees who were pretending to work, pretending they couldn't see the CEO screaming at his daughter. "If you kick her out," he said, his voice dropping to a deadly quiet register, "you are fired." I stared at him. "You cannot fire me for a personal dispute. I am the best operations director you have ever had. The numbers prove it. I can fire you for whatever reason I want," he said coldly. "I am the owner, but it will not just be firing. Harper." He stepped closer, blocking the light. "If you make Brittany leave, I will make sure you never work in this industry again. I know everyone in North Carolina. I know every supplier, every distributor, every competitor. I will tell them you stole from the company. I will tell them you are incompetent. I will destroy your reputation so thoroughly that you won't be able to get a job selling mattresses at a discount warehouse." I felt the blood leave my head. This wasn't a threat. It was a promise. He was holding my career, the one thing I had built for myself, the one thing that gave me independence, and he was holding a gun to its head. He saw the fear in my eyes. He smiled. It was a small, satisfied smile. "You have a good life here. Harper," he said, patting my shoulder. "Good salary, nice title. Don't throw it away because you are too selfish to share your home." He turned and walked to the door. "Fix it," he said. He walked out. I stood alone in the glass box. The papers were scattered at my feet. The bank statement lay face up, showing the charge for Lumiere Med Spa. I looked through the glass. My colleagues were typing furiously. No one looked up. No one met my eyes. They knew. They had seen the power dynamic shift. They had seen me reduced from a leader to a hostage. I realized then that I had been wrong about everything. I thought my job was my shield. I thought my competence protected me. But it didn't. My job was not my shield. It was the leash. Gordon didn't just employ me, he owned me. As long as I worked for him, as long as I lived in this state, he could take everything away from me with a single phone call. I bent down and picked up the papers. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. They were shaking from a rage so cold it felt like ice in my veins. He wanted me to take care of her? He wanted to use my career to trap me? Fine, I would take care of everything. I walked out of the conference room. I held my head high. I went back to my desk and sat down. I did not cry. I did not call Brittany. I opened my computer. I did not start working on the supply chain report. I opened a private browser window, and I started searching for real estate attorneys in Seattle. If he was going to burn my career in North Carolina, I simply had to be somewhere else when the match was struck. The war had shifted. It was no longer about loud parties or purple walls. Those were distractions. Flashbang grenades thrown to keep me disoriented while the real operation took place in the shadows. The noise had stopped, replaced by a terrifying, calculated silence. For the next few days, I moved through my house like a ghost. I stopped fighting. I stopped complaining about the dishes. I stopped asking for the money back. To Brittany and my father, this probably looked like submission. They probably thought they had broken me in that glass conference room, that the threat of career suicide had finally made me heal, but I was not submitting. I was observing. The first sign that something darker was happening came in the mail. I have always been meticulous about my correspondence. I sort it the moment I walk in the door. Bills, junk, personal. But on a Tuesday evening, I noticed a pile of envelopes on the kitchen counter that had already been slid open. They were not addressed to Brittany. They were addressed to me. There was a letter from my homeowner's insurance company. There was a statement from the county tax assessor. There was a letter from the water utility. I picked up the insurance letter. The paper was crinkled, as if someone had smoothed it out after balling it up. Brittany, I called out, keeping my voice level. Why is my mail open? She walked in from the patio, holding a glass of iced tea. Oh, sorry. I was waiting for a magazine I subscribed to. I just tore into the pile without looking. Honest mistake. I looked at her. She did not look sorry. She looked watchful. You accidentally opened 3 different envelopes? I asked. All related to the house? She shrugged. Paper is paper. Harper, do not be so paranoid. I put them back. Didn't I? I took the letters to my room and examined them. Nothing seemed to be missing, but the intent hung in the air like smoke. Why would she care about my property tax assessment? Why would she care about the water bill? The answer came 2 days later, and it arrived in a pickup truck with the words, Triangle Home Renovations, stenciled on the side. I had come home for lunch, a rare occurrence. But I needed to retrieve a file I had left behind. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw a man in a polo shirt standing on my front lawn, holding a clipboard and a tape measure. Brittany was standing next to him, pointing at the garage. I parked the car and walked over. My heart was thumping a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. Can I help you? I asked the man. He looked up, smiling professionally. Good afternoon. I'm just getting those measurements for the conversion. Conversion? I repeated. What conversion? Brittany stepped in front of him, her smile tight and warning. Oh, it is nothing. Harper, just getting an estimate. The man looked confused. An estimate for the garage apartment. He clarified. The lady here said you were looking to convert the detached garage into a rental unit. We were discussing plumbing lines. I felt the blood drain from my face. My garage, my space. I am the owner, I said to the man, my voice shaking slightly. And I did not authorize any estimate. There is going to be no conversion. Please leave. The man looked from me to Brittany, sensing the domestic radioactive decay. Right. Okay. Well, call us if you get on the same page. He retreated to his truck faster than I had ever seen a contractor move. When he was gone, I turned to Brittany. A rental unit? She crossed her arms. I'm just thinking ahead. Harper, if I'm going to live here long term, I need my own space. And Dad said it would add value to the property. He said he would pay for it. You are not living here long term. I said, She just smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was the smile of someone who knew a secret. "We will see," she said, that night. I did not go to sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the interaction, long term. Dad said, "Value to the property." I needed to know what was happening when I wasn't there. I needed eyes. I bought the cameras the next day during my lunch break. I drove to an electronics store 3 towns over, paid cash, and bought 3 tiny wireless cameras that looked like USB chargers. I installed them on Thursday morning. I waited until Brittany was in the shower. I plugged one into the outlet in the kitchen, facing the island. I plugged one into the living room, hidden behind a stack of books, and I plugged the third one, the most important one, in the hallway, pointed directly at the door to my home office. I went to work. I sat at my desk, my phone propped up next to my monitor, and I waited. For the first 4 hours, I saw nothing but Brittany wandering around in her robe, eating yogurt, and watching television. It was infuriating, but it wasn't incriminating. Then, at 2 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the hallway camera. I opened the app. The video feed was crisp. Brittany was standing in the hallway. She was dressed now, wearing jeans and a blouse. She looked left, toward the front door. She looked right, toward the bedrooms. Then, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a key. I stopped breathing. I lock my home office. I always lock it. The key is on my key ring, which was currently in my purse at work. But she had a key. She unlocked the door and slipped inside. I switched the feed to the kitchen camera, but she was gone. I didn't have a camera inside the office. I had been too afraid she would find it. I stared at the empty hallway on my screen, counting the seconds. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. 10 minutes later, the office door opened. Brittany emerged. She was holding a stack of file folders. My stomach dropped. Those were my personal files, my mortgage documents, my deed, my birth certificate, my social security card. She walked into the kitchen, right into the frame of the second camera. She laid the files on the island. She pulled out her phone, and then, systematically, coldly, she began to photograph every single page. Click, flip, click, flip. She photographed the deed, zooming in on the signature line. She photographed the mortgage statement, focusing on the account number. She photographed a utility bill I had left on the desk. Then, she did something that made no sense. She pulled a letter out of her pocket. It was an envelope that had already been through the mail. She placed it next to my utility bill and took a picture of them side by side. I zoomed in on the screen, squinting at the pixels. The letter she had brought was addressed to her, Brittany Parker. But the address was my house. I watched as she smiled, satisfied, and gathered the papers back up. She walked back to the office, returned the files, and locked the door. She wasn't just being nosy. She was building a case. I left work immediately. I told my assistant I had a migraine. It wasn't a lie. My head was pounding with the pressure of the realization. I didn't go home. I drove to downtown Raleigh, to a building I had passed 1,000 times but never entered. I didn't go to our family lawyer. Gordon played golf with him. I went to a firm that specialized in tenant disputes and property law. I paid $300 for a 1-hour consultation with a man named Mr. Vance. He was 60 years old, wore a cheap suit, and had eyes that had seen every scam in the book. I showed him the video on my phone. I explained the situation. I told him about the key, the mail, the visit that was supposed to be 3 weeks and was now bleeding into month 2. Mr. Vance watched the video of Brittany photographing the documents. He leaned back in his chair and took off his glasses. "You have a problem. Ms. Parker," he said. "A very expensive problem. She is my sister." I said, "She is a guest. Not anymore," he said bluntly. "In North Carolina. If someone stays in your home for a certain period, or if they receive mail there, or if they move in furniture, they can establish tenancy. It does not matter if they pay rent. It does not matter if there is a lease. It is called tenancy at will. He pointed to the video freeze frame of the letters side by side. That right there? That is her establishing proof of residency. She is changing her address on her bank accounts, her credit cards, probably her driver's license. She is creating a paper trail that says she lives there. So what? I asked. I own the house. I can just kick her out. Mister? Vance shook his head slowly. No, you cannot. If you change the locks, that is an illegal eviction. If you throw her clothes on the lawn, that is an illegal eviction. She can sue you, and she will win. The police will not remove her. They will tell you it is a civil matter. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. If she establishes residency, you have to formally evict her. You have to give her 30 days' notice. Then you have to file a court summons. Then you have to wait for a hearing. Then you have to wait for the sheriff to execute the order. In this county, that process takes 3 to 4 months. Minimum. 3 months? I whispered. And that is if she does not fight it, he added. If she claims she has an oral lease? If she claims she paid for renovations, like that garage conversion she was trying to start, it could take a year. And during that year, she lives in your house. You pay the bills, and you cannot touch her. I felt sick, physically sick. Why is she photographing the deed? I asked. Mr. Vance sighed. Leverage, or fraud. She might be trying to get a loan against the property, or maybe she just wants to know exactly how much equity you have, so she can argue she is entitled to compensation for improvements she makes. He looked me in the eye. Listen to me closely. You are on the edge of a cliff. If she gets one utility bill in her name, or if she stays another 30 days, you are locked in. You become a landlord, and she becomes the tenant from hell. What do I do? I asked. He hesitated. The legal advice is to serve her with a 30-day notice to quit immediately. Today. And the practical advice? I asked. He smirked. The practical advice? You need to make her want to leave, or you need to sell the property out from under her, because once she digs in, the law is on her side, not yours. I walked out of his office into the bright afternoon sun. The city noises were loud, but I felt like I was underwater. It wasn't just a freeloading sister. It wasn't just a dad trying to control me. It was a hostile takeover. Brittany was not waiting to get back on her feet. She was planting roots. She was manufacturing evidence. She was preparing to steal my home, one utility bill at a time, and my father was undoubtedly funding the legal strategy. They were going to trap me in my own house, force me to serve them, and if I tried to fight, they would drag me through a year of court battles while I paid for their electricity. I got into my car. I looked at the dashboard clock. It was 4:30 in the afternoon. I sat there for a long time. I thought about the purple walls. I thought about the broken art. I thought about the long-term plans. I remembered what Mr. Vance had said. Sell the property out from under her. A cold calm settled over me. It was the same calm I felt when a supply chain collapsed, and I had to reroute a shipment across 3 continents in an hour. I was not going to evict her. That was playing their game. That was playing by rules they could twist. I was going to detonate the playing field. I picked up my phone. I didn't call Gordon. I didn't call Brittany. I searched my contacts for a name I hadn't spoken to in 2 years. Tara McKenna. We had gone to college together. She was now the most aggressive, discreet real estate investor in Raleigh. She didn't list houses on Zillow. She bought them for cash. Off-market. For clients who needed speed and silence. I hit the call button. Harper? Tara's voice was surprised. I haven't heard from you in ages. Tara. I said, I have a question. Sure, shoot. If I wanted to sell a house, fully furnished, cash only, closing in 48 hours, could you do it? There was a silence on the line. A long, calculating silence. Is the house in trouble? She asked. No, I said. The house is perfect, but the owner needs to disappear. Tara laughed. It sounded like the cocking of a gun. I can make that happen, she said. I hung up. I started the engine. I wasn't going home to fight. I wasn't going home to scream. I was going home to smile. I was going to play the role of the beaten, submissive daughter for just a few more days. I would let Brittany think she had won. I would let her take her pictures and plan her renovations, because she didn't know that the house she was stealing was already gone. The moment I walked out of that law office, the Harper Parker who cried over dirty dishes died. The Harper Parker who begged her father for understanding ceased to exist. In her place, a cold, calculating project manager was born. I realized that I'd been trying to solve an emotional problem with logic, and that was a losing strategy. You cannot negotiate with people who view you as a resource rather than a human being. You do not ask a parasite to please stop feeding. You cut off the blood supply. I was done playing the victim. I was about to play the bank robber. But the vault I was robbing was my own life. I started the next morning. I did not go to work early. Instead, I drove to a bank across town, a credit union that had no affiliation with the massive national bank my father used for his business and personal accounts. Gordon Parker had friends everywhere, bank managers who would happily slip him a detail or two about his daughter's finances over a round of golf. I needed a fortress he could not breach. I opened a new checking account and a safety deposit box. I did not transfer my savings electronically, which would leave a digital paper trail my father could trace. Instead, over the next 3 days, I visited 4 different branches of my old bank, withdrawing cash in amounts just under the reporting limit. I carried the cash in a gym bag, feeling the weight of my freedom against my hip, and deposited it into the new, sterile account that nobody knew existed. Next came the documents. The camera footage of Brittany photographing my deed haunted me. I knew she was building a case for residency, or worse, fraud. I waited until she left for her trauma therapy, which was actually a mimosa brunch with her new friends, and I raided my own home office. I took the deed, I took my passport, I took my birth certificate, my social security card, and the hard drive containing 10 years of digital photos. I drove them straight to the safety deposit box. When I locked that metal drawer, I felt the first true breath of air enter my lungs in weeks. If Brittany wanted to claim she lived there, she would have to do it without a single scrap of paper to prove I existed. Then, I called Tara. We met at a coffee shop 3 towns over, a place with sticky tables and bad lighting where no one from Northline Furnishings would ever be caught dead. Tara McKenna looked exactly as I remembered. Sharp, manicured, and radiating the energy of a woman who could sell a haunted house to a ghost. I slid a manila envelope across the table. It contained photos of my house, the ones I had taken before the purple paint incident, and a spec sheet. I need out. Tara, I said, keeping my voice low. And I need out fast. Tara flipped through the photos. She knew the house. She had helped me find it 4 years ago. She knew how much I loved the crown molding and the original hardwood floors. She looked up at me, her eyes narrowing. You said on the phone you wanted to sell off market. Why? That neighborhood is hot. If we put a sign in the yard, we could get a bidding war. No sign. I said firmly, no open house, no listing on the MLS. If a sign goes up, the deal is dead. I took a sip of black coffee. There is a tenant. I lied. Sort of. A squatter. Family. Tara raised an eyebrow. Ah, the messy kind. The worst kind. I confirmed. I need a buyer who is an investor. Someone who wants the asset, not the move-in date. Someone who has cash and does not care if the living room is currently painted electric purple. Purple? Tara winced. It is a long story. I said, I want to sell it fully furnished. Everything stays. The sofas, the tables, the beds. The buyer takes it all. Tara tapped a fingernail on the table. Selling furnished limits the pool. Selling with a difficult occupant limits it further. You are going to take a hit on the price. Harper. I leaned forward. I do not care about the top dollar. I care about the closing date. I need to close in less than 10 days. Can you do it? Tara stared at me for a long moment. She saw the desperation, but she also saw the resolve. She nodded slowly. I have a network of institutional buyers. She said, corporations that buy rental portfolios, they do not care about purple walls. They care about cap rates and square footage. If the price is right, they will wire the money and sign the papers without ever stepping foot inside. Get it done, I said. The next phase was the hardest. The job hunt. Gordon had promised to blacklist me in North Carolina, and I believed him. He was a petty, vindictive man with a long reach. If I applied to any furniture company in the Southeast, his phone would ring, so I looked where his shadow could not reach. I looked 3,000 miles west. I targeted Seattle. I targeted the tech sector and logistics firms that had nothing to do with dining tables and armchairs. I spent my nights in my car, parked in the lot of a 24-hour grocery store, using their Wi-Fi to conduct video interviews on my laptop. I couldn't risk doing it at home where Brittany might overhear, or at work where the IT department might be monitoring my traffic. I became a ghost in my own life. During the day, I went to Northline and played the part of the defeated daughter. I kept my head down. I did the supply chain reports. I let Gordon walk past my desk without acknowledging me, letting him believe his threat had worked. At home, I played the part of the submissive sister. I let Brittany control the remote. I let her eat my food. When she complained that the house was too cold, I turned up the heat. When she left her dirty laundry in the hallway, I stepped over it without a word. But while I was playing dead, I was smuggling my life out of the house. I couldn't walk out with suitcases. That would trigger the alarm. So I moved my belongings out in plain sight, disguised as trash. I bought a box of heavy-duty black garbage bags. Every morning, I would fill one. Sometimes it was actual trash, but in the bottom, wrapped in old newspapers, I would hide the things that mattered. My grandmother's jewelry box, my favorite winter coat, the first editions of books I'd collected since college. I would walk out to the car, swinging the bag, taking out the trash. I would call out to Brittany if she was awake. She never looked twice. Why would she? She treated the house like a dumpster anyway. I drove these bags to a storage unit I had rented under a fake name. Night by night, piece by piece, I was hollowing out the house. I left the big things, the furniture, the TV, the kitchen appliances. I left the cheap clothes in my closet to make it look full. But the soul of the house was being surgically removed. Then, the email came. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I was sitting in my car during my lunch break, eating a sandwich I couldn't taste. My phone pinged. Subject: Offer of employment. Cobalt Harbor Strategies. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the phone. I opened the email. I read it once, then I read it again, then I read it a third time to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. They were offering me the position of Vice President of Operations. The salary was not just a match. It was nearly double what Gordon paid me. There was a signing bonus. There was a relocation package that included 2 months of temporary corporate housing in downtown Seattle. I sat there in the parking lot, surrounded by the humid heat of a North Carolina summer, and I felt the cool breeze of the Pacific Northwest hitting my face. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. I simply pressed reply. I accept. I hit send. The moment the email vanished from my outbox, the invisible chain around my neck snapped. I was no longer Harper Parker, the daughter of Gordon, the sister of Brittany. I was Harper Parker, VP of Operations. I had a future, and it was a future they couldn't touch. Now, I just needed the exit window. I needed Brittany out of the house. I couldn't have the movers, or the chaotic final exit, happen while she was sitting on the couch watching The Real Housewives. I needed a gap in her surveillance. I didn't have to wait long. The universe, which had been beating me down for months, finally decided to throw me a bone. That Friday evening, I came home to find Brittany packing a suitcase, not a moving box, but a sleek, expensive carry-on. She was humming to herself, vibrating with excitement. Going somewhere? I asked, placing my keys on the counter. I tried to sound casual, but my pulse was hammering in my throat. She spun around, grinning. Yes, you will never guess. Tiffany, my nail tech, she invited me to a wellness retreat in Scottsdale. Scottsdale? I repeated. In Arizona? Yes, Brittany squealed. It is this super exclusive resort. They do aura cleansing and crystal healing. I need it. Harper, my aura is so muddy from all the stress you put me under. She threw a bikini into the bag. I am leaving tomorrow morning. I will be gone until Tuesday night. Just a quick reset. She looked at me. her eyes narrowing slightly. "And do not think you can change the locks while I'm gone," she warned. "I have rights, you know, and Dad is checking in on the house on Sunday." I forced a smile. It was the hardest acting performance of my life. "Have fun." "Brittany," I said, "I will not touch the locks. I promise. I wouldn't need to touch the locks." As she prattled on about the healing properties of desert sand. I did the math in my head. She leaves Saturday morning. She returns Tuesday night. That gave me roughly 80 hours. 80 hours to finalize the sale. 80 hours to clear out the last of my things. 80 hours to disappear from the state of North Carolina forever. I waited until she went to bed. Then I went out to my car and called Tara. "It is a go," I whispered. Tara didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I have the buyer lined up, an investment group out of Charlotte. They have the cash ready. They can wire it Monday morning. Can we close remotely?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "I will email you the DocuSign papers. You sign. I notarize the deed records on Monday afternoon." "And the keys?" I asked. "Leave them on the counter," she said. "The new owners will have a lockbox on the door by Tuesday morning." I hung up the phone. I looked up at the dark house. Brittany was asleep in the guest room, dreaming of crystal healing and a future where she lived in my house forever. She thought she had won. She thought she was going on a vacation. She didn't know that she was actually going on a permanent exile. I walked back inside. I stood in the hallway and looked at the purple walls one last time. They didn't make me angry anymore. Now, they just looked like a problem for the new management. I went to my room and pulled out my own suitcase. I didn't pack much, just a few changes of clothes for the flight. I didn't need the rest. The rest was just stuff, and I was learning that stuff was heavy. I was traveling light. The plan was set. The trap was primed. The moment Brittany's plane wheels left the tarmac tomorrow morning, I would initiate the sequence that would blow their world apart. I lay down on my bed, fully dressed, staring at the clock. 3 a.m., 4 a.m. I didn't sleep. I just counted down the minutes until sunrise. The sun was coming up on the last day of my old life, and I was ready to run. Saturday morning arrived with the brightness of a spotlight, illuminating the final act of my performance. Brittany stood by the open trunk of her Uber, checking her reflection in the side mirror one last time. She wore a wide-brimmed hat and oversized sunglasses that cost more than my first car. She looked like a movie star escaping the paparazzi, not a divorcee escaping her responsibilities. She turned to me, pointing a manicured finger. "Do not touch my stuff while I'm gone. Harper," she commanded. "I mean it. If I come back and find one shoe moved, or if you have painted over my wall, I will tell Dad, and you know what he will do." I stood in the doorway, my hands clasped behind my back to hide the fact that they were clenched into fists. "I won't touch a thing," I said. "I promise." She narrowed her eyes, searching for a trace of sarcasm, but I gave her nothing. I was a mirror, reflecting only what she wanted to see. A beaten, obedient sister. "Good," she said. "Water my plants, and do not drink the oat milk. It is for my smoothies." She got into the car. The door slammed. The Uber pulled away. Turning the corner at the end of the cul-de-sac, I watched until the taillights vanished. I counted to 10. 1, 2, 3. The silence that descended on the neighborhood was heavy, but to me, it sounded like a starting pistol. I turned around, walked into the house, and locked the door. Then I pulled out my phone and dialed Tara. "She is gone," I said. "Pull the trigger." Tara answered. The next 48 hours were a blur of calculated, adrenaline-fueled precision. I was not living in a home anymore. I was operating in a command center. Tara had lined up a buyer called Nexus Holdings. They were an investment group that specialized in distressed assets and rapid acquisitions. They did not care about the purple walls. They did not care about the broken art in the garage. They only cared about the location and the price. They wanted the deed, and they wanted it yesterday. The contract hit my email inbox at 10:30 in the morning. It was brutal. The price was 15% below market value, a convenience fee for the speed and the lack of inspection. A month ago, That loss would have made me sick. Today, it felt like paying a ransom for my own soul. I scrolled to the bottom, I signed digitally. Then came the hard part, the physical extraction. I could not have a moving truck in the driveway during the day. Mrs. Higgins across the street was a neighborhood watch captain with a direct line to the gossip mill. If she saw me moving furniture, she would ask questions. If she asked questions, word might get back to Gordon. So I became a creature of the night. I hired a private moving company that specialized in discreet relocations. They usually worked for celebrities or politicians running from scandals. They charged 3 times the normal rate, but they guaranteed silence. They arrived at 2 a.m. on Sunday. Their truck was unmarked, black, and silent. The crew wore dark uniforms and moved like shadows. I met the foreman at the door. Quietly, I whispered. He nodded. He didn't ask why. He just pointed to his men. We moved only my things. This was the most critical part of the plan. If I emptied the house completely, it would look like a sale. It would look suspicious. I needed the house to look lived in until the very last second. I needed it to look like Brittany's house. The movers took my mattress, but left the bed frame. They took my clothes, but left the hangers. They took my books, my files, and the few pieces of furniture that had sentimental value, my grandmother's rocking chair, the desk where I wrote my college thesis. We left the living room exactly as Brittany had arranged it. The purple walls screamed in the darkness. The leopard print chaise lounge sat like a throne of bad taste. The kitchen was still piled high with her dirty dishes and the half-empty bottles of wine she had left behind. It was a trap. A meticulously constructed stage set, designed to make anyone looking through the window think that life was proceeding as normal. By 4 a.m, the truck was loaded. My bedroom was empty, stripped down to the bare walls. I slept on the floor that night, wrapped in a single blanket, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. It was the best sleep I had had in months. Sunday came with a new kind of terror, the digital extraction. I sat on the floor of my empty room with my laptop. I logged into the Northline furnishing server. I had administrative access. I had built the system. After all, I didn't delete the company data. That would be a crime. And I wasn't a criminal. I was just resigning. But I did delete myself. I went through every folder, every shared drive, every project management board. I removed my personal templates. I deleted the cheat sheets I had created to help the incompetent managers run their departments. I wiped the contact list that resided on my personal cloud, but synced to the company network. Then, I went to the password manager. For years, I had been the one who remembered the passwords, the vendor portals, the shipping logistics accounts, the bank access for the operational funds. I had them all saved in a secure vault that I shared with Gordon. I didn't change them. That would raise an alarm. Instead, I simply turned off the auto-renewal on the Password Vault subscription. It was set to expire in 2 days. When it did, the vault would lock. And since Gordon never bothered to remember the master password, he always told me, "That is what I pay you for." He would be locked out of his own digital brain. It was a time bomb, silent, invisible, and devastating. I was just closing my laptop when my phone rang. The screen flashed. Dad. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was 6 p.m. on Sunday. He never called on Sundays unless he wanted something. I took a deep breath. I let it ring twice. Then I answered. "Hi, Dad. Harper." Gordon's voice boomed down the line. "I am in the neighborhood. I just finished a round of golf with Judge Reynolds. I thought I would stop by, check on the house, see how you girls are doing." Panic surged through me like an electric shock. If he came now, if he walked in and saw my empty room, or saw the boxes missing from the garage, it was over. He would block the sale. He would freeze my accounts. He would physically bar the door. I looked around the empty bedroom. I looked at the hallway where Brittany's shoeboxes were still stacked. "You can't," I said. There was a pause. The line went cold. "Excuse me?" Gordon asked, his voice dropping that octave that usually signaled an explosion. "I mean, now is not a good time," I said. forcing my voice to sound tired and annoyed. "Brittany is not here. She went to a retreat in Arizona. I know that," Gordon snapped. "I paid for it. I am coming to see you." "We need to discuss the quarterly projections, Dad," I said, injecting a note of frantic stress into my voice. "I am working. I have a migraine. And I'm trying to finish the supply chain report you screamed at me about on Friday. If you come over, I am going to lose my train of thought. And it won't be ready for the Monday meeting." I held my breath. I was using his own weapon against him. I was betting on his greed being stronger than his suspicion. There was a long silence. I could hear the blinker of his car clicking in the background. Click, click, click. "You are working on the report?" he asked. "Yes," I lied. "And it is a mess. I need quiet. Dad, please, if you want this solved, let me work." He grunted. "Fine, but have it on my desk by 8 tomorrow morning. And clean up that front yard. I drove by last week and the grass looked disgraceful." "I will." "Dad," I said. The line went dead. I dropped the phone onto the floor and gasped for air. I was shaking. He had been minutes away, maybe blocks away, but he didn't come because Brittany wasn't there. I realized then that without Brittany to perform for, without an audience to watch him exert his power, Gordon didn't actually care about me. He didn't care about the house. He only cared about the work I did for him. As long as he thought the work was being done, he was happy to ignore me. It was his fatal flaw. He thought I was a machine that ran on autopilot. He didn't realize the machine had already unplugged itself. Monday morning, the day of the closing, I went to work. I had to. If I didn't show up, they would come looking. I walked into Northline Furnishings at 8 o'clock sharp. I placed the supply chain report on Gordon's desk. It was a perfect report. It was the best work I had ever done. It laid out exactly how screwed the company was if they didn't modernize their shipping routes within the next month. I looked at his empty chair. I looked at the family photos on the credenza. Pictures of him and Brittany smiling on a boat. Pictures of him receiving awards. There were no pictures of me. I walked back to my desk. I cleared my browser history. I shredded the few physical notes I had in my drawer. At 11 o'clock, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Tara. "Funds received. Deed recorded. Nexus Holdings is now the legal owner of the property." I stared at the screen. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. It was done. I did not own the house anymore. The purple walls, the cigarette burns, the debt, the memories. They belonged to a corporation in Charlotte. And then, a second text from Tara. "Client wants immediate possession. Locksmiths are en route. ETA 2 hours. 2 hours. I stood up. I looked around the office. I looked at the marketing manager who was gossiping by the water cooler. I looked at the sales team stressing over their quotas. I grabbed my purse. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't write a resignation letter. I didn't clean out my coffee mug. I just walked to the elevator. "Where are you going?" the receptionist asked as I passed the front desk. "Gordon has a meeting with you at 2. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. "Tell him I'm busy," I said. I walked out into the parking lot. The sun was high and hot. I got into my car and drove. Not home. I couldn't go home. It wasn't my home anymore. I drove to the airport. I parked in the long-term lot. I threw the keys to my car, which was leased in the company name, under the seat. I left it there. Let them find it. Let them tow it. I walked into the terminal with nothing but my carry-on bag and the clothes on my back. As I stood in the security line, checking my phone one last time, I saw a notification from the smart doorbell I had left behind at the house. Motion detected at front door. I opened the app. A van had pulled up. A man in a blue jumpsuit was drilling into the front door lock. He was removing the handle. He was installing a heavy-duty, commercial-grade padlock box. Next to him stood a woman in a suit, the representative for Nexus Holdings. She was holding a clipboard. They were locking it down. I watched as the man finished. He tested the new key. It worked. The door was sealed. My phone buzzed again. A text from Brittany, sent from poolside in Arizona. "Just booked a massage. Hope you are cleaning the kitchen. Don't forget, Trash day is Tuesday. Love you. I looked at the text. I looked at the video feed of the locksmith sealing her out of the only home she had left. I deleted the app. I turned off my phone. I handed my boarding pass to the agent. Destination? She asked. Seattle, I said. One way. I walked down the jet bridge. The tunnel was cool and dark, but at the end of it, I could see the light of the plane. I was leaving everything behind. My family, my history, my guilt. The trap was set. The cage was closed. And the mouse was 3,000 miles away, sipping a mimosa in Scottsdale, completely unaware that the house of cards had already collapsed. The flight to Seattle was a 6-hour decompression chamber as the plane climbed through the cloud layer above Raleigh, leaving the humidity and the history behind. I felt a physical sensation of lightness that was almost dizzying. It was as if gravity worked differently when you were not carrying the weight of 2 adult narcissists on your back. I sat in seat 4A, drinking sparkling water, and for the first time in years, I did not check my phone. I did not worry about a supply chain crisis. I did not worry about a frantic text demanding money. I just watched the map on the screen as the little plane icon moved inch by inch across the country, putting 3,000 miles of mountains and prairies between me and the wreckage I had left behind. I landed in a different world. Seattle was gray, cool, and smelling of rain and cedar. It was the antithesis of the sticky, suffocating heat of the South. I took a cab to the corporate housing my new company had arranged. It was in a glass tower in the South Lake Union District, a building that looked like a shard of ice piercing the sky. When I keyed into the apartment, the silence greeted me like an old friend. The space was modern, impersonal, and pristine. There were no purple walls. There were no dirty dishes. There was just a wall of floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the dark water of Lake Union, where the lights of houseboats reflected on the surface. I unpacked my single suitcase. I hung up my 3 blazers. I placed my laptop on the glass desk. That was it. That was my entire life now. I had left my house, the house I had labored over, the house I had loved, filled with the artifacts of a life I was discarding. I had left the leopard print pillows. I had left the half-empty bottles of wine. I had left the television remote right where Brittany liked it. It was a shell. I had extracted the pearl, my documents, my money, my sanity, and left the oyster for them to fight over. At 9 a.m. on Tuesday, exactly 24 hours before Brittany was scheduled to return, I sat at that glass desk and initiated the final legal strike. I drafted a single email. The recipients were Gordon Parker, Brittany Parker, and the HR department of Northline Furnishings. The subject line was simple: Notice of resignation and cessation of contact. I attached a formal letter from a Seattle-based attorney I had retained online. The letter stated clearly that I had resigned from my position. Effective immediately, it stated that I had relocated and that my new address was confidential. It stated that any attempt to contact me regarding financial requests, property disputes, or personal grievances would be considered harassment and dealt with through legal channels. I hit send. Then, I blocked their numbers. I knew what would happen. I knew Gordon would try to call. I knew he would turn red, scream at his secretary, and threaten to sue me. But he couldn't fire me. I had already quit. He couldn't blacklist me. I was already hired, and he couldn't find me. I spent the rest of that Tuesday walking through the drizzling rain of my new city. I bought a coffee from a shop where no one knew my name. I bought a warm sweater. I breathed in the cold air, letting it freeze the last lingering bits of guilt in my chest. But I knew the real climax was yet to come. I knew Brittany's flight schedule. She was flying first class, on points she had probably stolen from her ex-husband, landing in Raleigh at 9:30 at night. She would take an Uber. She would be tired, sun-kissed, and full of stories about her spiritual awakening that she would expect me to listen to while I cooked her dinner. I sat in my apartment as the sun went down over the Space Needle. It was 7 o'clock in Seattle, which meant it was 10 o'clock in Raleigh, the witching hour. I placed my phone on the desk. I had unblocked Brittany's number for this one specific window of time. I needed to know. I needed to hear the moment the trap snapped shut. I closed my eyes and pictured it. I could see the Uber pulling up to the curb. The house would be dark because the electricity had been transferred to the new holding company, and they had likely set the smart timers to off. Brittany would drag her heavy suitcase up the driveway, her heels clicking on the concrete. She would be annoyed that the porch light wasn't on. She would be composing a lecture in her head about how selfish I was for not waiting up to greet her. She would reach the door. She would reach for the keypad. For months. The code had been her birthday. 4 digits that gave her access to everything I owned. I imagined her manicured finger pressing the buttons. Beep, 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 beep. She would wait for the mechanical whir of the deadbolt retracting. Instead, she would see a small red light flash. Access denied. She would frown. She would think she mistyped it. She would type it again. Harder this time. Stabbing the keys. Beep, 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 beep. Red light. She would try the handle. Locked. She would try her key, the one she had copied for her nail technician. But the key wouldn't fit. The lock was different. The Nexus Holdings locksmith had installed a commercial-grade deadbolt that looked like something meant for a bank vault, not a bungalow. She would step back, confused. She would look at the windows. She would see the familiar shapes of the furniture inside, the purple walls, the lamp. But she couldn't get to them. It was a museum exhibit of her own life, and she was on the wrong side of the glass. I imagined her banging on the door. "Harper!" she would scream. "Harper, open up! It is not funny. I know you are in there." She would pound on the wood. She would kick the door, and then the door would open. But it wouldn't be me. Tara had told me the plan. Nexus Holdings did not mess around. They had a property manager stationed at the house specifically for this transition, a man named Mr. Sterling. He was not a therapist. He was not a father. He was an asset manager. I imagined the look on Brittany's face when the door swung open and she saw a stranger standing in the foyer, my foyer, wearing a gray suit and holding a clipboard. Behind him, she would see something that would stop her heart. Boxes, dozens of industrial cardboard boxes stacked in the center of the living room. My phone rang. The sound shattered the silence of my Seattle apartment. It was a shrill, demanding ringtone. The screen lit up with the name Brittany. I stared at it. My heart rate did not spike. My hands did not shake. I felt a cold, calm detachment, like a surgeon looking at an X-ray. I let it ring 3 times. I wanted her to feel the panic rising in her throat. I wanted her to realize that the lifeline she had abused for 30 years was fraying. On the 4th ring, I picked up. I didn't say hello. I just pressed the phone to my ear and listened. "Harper!" Brittany was screaming. She was hysterical. Her voice was jagged, tearing at the edges. "Harper, who is this man? Why is he in our house? He says I cannot come in. He says I am trespassing." I could hear the wind blowing in the background. I could hear the heavy thud of her suitcase being kicked. I could hear a male voice in the background, calm and authoritative, saying, "Ma'am, you need to step off the porch." "Harper, tell him," she shrieked. "Tell him I live here. Tell him it is my house. Where are you? Why aren't you answering the door?" I took a sip of my water. I looked out at the lights of the city reflected in the black lake. "Brittany," I said. My voice was soft. It was the voice of someone speaking to a ghost. "Harper, thank God." She sobbed. "Tell this freak to get out. He has packed up my stuff. He put my clothes in boxes. He says he is the manager. He is the manager." "Brittany," I said. She stopped screaming. The silence that followed was thick with confusion. "What?" she whispered. "What do you mean?" I leaned back in my chair. "I mean that Mr. Sterling works for the new owners." I said, "He is in charge of the property now." "New owners?" she stammered. Her brain was misfiring. She couldn't process the words. "What new owners?" "It is your house." I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment I had dreamed of every time she left a wet towel on the floor. Every time she stole money from my wallet. Every time she told me I was nothing but the help. I sold it. "Brittany?" "No," she gasped. "No, you didn't. You can't. You live there. I live there. I sold it 3 days ago. I continued, my voice steady and relentless. The closing was finalized yesterday morning. The deed has been recorded. The wire transfer has cleared. But where are you? She asked, her voice sounding small and terrified. I am gone. I said, gone where? Come back. You have to fix this. Dad will kill you. Dad can't fix this. I said, and neither can you. I could hear her hyperventilating. I could hear the reality crashing down on her. She was standing on a porch in the middle of the night with nothing but a suitcase and a bikini. She had no key. She had no money. She had no home. But my stuff, she wailed. My clothes. My furniture. My life. The manager has instructions. I said, your things have been packed. You have 24 hours to arrange for a moving company to collect them from the driveway. If you do not claim them, they will be hauled to the dump. The dump? She screamed. Harper, you are crazy. You can't do this to me. I am your sister. I closed my eyes. You were never my sister. Brittany, I said quietly, you were just a tenant who refused to pay rent, and your lease is up. I heard the man in the background speak up, louder this time. Ma'am, I have called the police. You are creating a disturbance. You need to vacate the property immediately. Police? Brittany whimpered. Harper, please don't let them arrest me. Just tell him to let me in. I will be good. I promise. I will clean the dishes. I will pay you back. Just let me in. It was the same pleading tone she had used 3 months ago. The same manipulation. But the receiver on my end was made of ice. I cannot let you in. Brittany, I said. Why? She cried. Why are you doing this? I looked at the reflection of my own face in the darkened window. I looked different. I looked older. Perhaps. But I looked solid. I looked like someone who could not be broken. Because, I said, delivering the words slowly, savoring the weight of them, that is not my house anymore, and I am not your keeper anymore. I didn't wait for her response. I didn't wait for the threats or the tears or the invocation of our father's name. I ended the call. I stared at the phone for a second. Then I powered it down completely. I tossed it onto the sofa. I stood up and walked to the window. I pressed my hand against the cold glass. I imagined Brittany standing there in the North Carolina heat, the red light of the lock blinking at her, the police sirens wailing in the distance. Realizing for the first time in her life that the safety net she had jumped into had been removed, and she was falling into the free fall she had designed for herself. I felt a tear run down my cheek. It wasn't for her. It was for the Harper who had lived in that house, the Harper who had tried so hard to be good. I grieved for her, because I had to kill her to survive. But as I looked out at the rain-swept city of Seattle, I took a deep breath. The air was clean. The night was silent. I was alone, and it was wonderful. The police report stated that Brittany Parker was removed from the premises at 11:45 at night, screaming threats that were audible 3 houses away. But the real noise did not start until the next morning. I was sitting in a coffee shop in Pioneer Square, watching the rain streak the window. When the legal tsunami hit, it started with a flurry of emails to my old work address, which I was monitoring one last time before severing the connection forever. Brittany had called Gordon. Of course she had. She had probably woken him up in the middle of the night, hysterical, claiming I had gone insane and sold our heritage to strangers. I could picture Gordon's reaction. The vein in his forehead would have bulged. He would have thrown on his robe, red-faced and sputtering, reaching for his phone to unleash the full force of his patriarchal wrath upon me. But when he dialed my number, he got nothing. Just a sterile automated message saying the subscriber was unavailable. So he went to the house, I heard later, through the grapevine of a sympathetic former colleague, that Gordon showed up at my old address at 8 in the morning, ready to tear the doors off their hinges. He marched up the driveway, expecting to bully his way in, expecting to find me cowering in the kitchen. Instead, he found a commercial dumpster in the driveway. He found a crew of movers hauling Brittany's leopard print chaise lounge out to the curb because she had failed to hire her own truck within the 24-hour window. and he found Mr. Sterling, the property manager for Nexus Holdings. Gordon apparently tried to play the heavy. He screamed that he was Gordon Parker, a pillar of the community, and that this sale was fraudulent. He threatened to sue Nexus Holdings into bankruptcy. He threatened to have Mr. Sterling arrested for trespassing, but Gordon made a critical error. He was used to bullying family members and small-time vendors. He was not used to fighting institutional capital. Nexus Holdings did not care about his bluster. They showed him the deed. It was signed, notarized, and recorded. They showed him the wire transfer confirmation. It was clean money, fully cleared. Gordon tried to argue that I had no right to sell without his permission. Mr. Sterling simply asked him, "Is your name on the deed?" Mr. Parker? Gordon had to say no. "Is your name on the mortgage?" Gordon had to say no. Then, Mr. Sterling said the words that must have felt like a physical slap to a man who believed he owned everyone in his orbit. "Then you have no standing here. Sir, please step off the private property, or we will add your name to the restraining order we are currently filing against your daughter Brittany." That was the moment the ground shifted. Gordon realized that the leash he had held for 32 years, the threat of cutting me off, the threat of firing me, the threat of social ostracization, was attached to nothing. He was pulling on a rope that I had already cut. He drove to Northline Furnishings in a blind rage, ready to fire me publicly, ready to humiliate me. But when he got there, my desk was empty, my computer was wiped, and on his desk sat my resignation letter, effective immediately. He couldn't fire me. I was already gone. And then, the dominoes began to fall. I had been the architect of Northline's entire operational system. I knew the vendor schedules. I knew the shipping codes. I knew which suppliers needed to be paid early to keep the timber moving and which ones could wait. I carried the entire cognitive load of that company in my head because Gordon was too busy playing golf and being the face of the brand. On Wednesday, 2 days after I left, the password vault locked. Gordon called IT, screaming. They told him the subscription had lapsed, and the master recovery email was, well, it was mine, and since I had deleted my email account, the recovery link went into a digital void. He was locked out of his own bank portals. He was locked out of the logistics software. On Thursday, a shipment of teak wood from Indonesia was flagged at customs in Charleston. Usually, I would have handled this with a single phone call to a broker I had known for 5 years. But no one at Northline knew who the broker was. They didn't have the contact info. The shipment sat on the dock, racking up thousands of dollars in demurrage fees every single day. On Friday, the biggest client Northline had, a hotel chain refurnishing 40 locations, called to ask about their delivery schedule. Gordon took the call. He was stressed. He was angry. And because he was Gordon, he reverted to his default setting, aggression. He told the client to stop nagging him, that the furniture would get there when it got there. He forgot that the client was not his daughter. The client was a corporation with a strict contract. They canceled the order on Monday morning. $1.2 million in revenue vanished in a heartbeat. And through all of this, Gordon had a house guest. Brittany had nowhere to go. Her ex-husband wouldn't take her. Her friends, the ones who drank my wine and smoked in my kitchen, suddenly had no spare rooms available when she wasn't providing the party venue. So, she moved in with Gordon. I can only imagine the poetic justice of that household. Gordon, who was hemorrhaging money at the company, coming home to find Brittany, who demanded high thread count sheets and organic smoothies. Brittany needed attention. She needed money. She needed to be taken care of. And Gordon was the one who had ordered, "You have to take care of her." Now the universe was handing him the bill for that order. I heard from my old assistant, who texted me from a burner phone, that the atmosphere in the Parker household was toxic. Brittany was rearranging Gordon's furniture. Brittany was criticizing his housekeeper. Brittany was running up his credit cards because she was too traumatized to work. Gordon was living in the hell he had tried to force me to inhabit. He was being drained dry by the monster he had created and enabled. 2 weeks after I arrived in Seattle, I received a voicemail. It appeared in my blocked folder, but I saw the transcript. It was from Gordon. The tone was shocking. The bluster was gone. The anger was gone. He sounded old. He sounded defeated. "Harper," he said, "look, we made mistakes. Things got heated, but you cannot just walk away from the family business. The logistics are a mess. We lost the Marriott contract. I need you to come back. I will give you the VP title. I will give you a raise. And, listen, I will kick Brittany out. I will get her an apartment. Just come home. We can fix this." I read the words, and I felt a wave of cold, hard pity. He wasn't calling because he missed his daughter. He wasn't calling because he loved me. He was calling because he was bleeding money. He was offering to sacrifice Brittany, his precious golden child, not because it was the right thing to do, but because she had become a liability and he needed his asset back. He was willing to trade one daughter for another, depending on who was profitable at the moment. It was the final confirmation I needed. I was never a person to him. I was a human resource, and my return on investment had just become too high for him to afford. I did not reply. I selected the message and hit delete. I walked out of my apartment building and onto the streets of South Lake Union. The wind was whipping off the water, cold and biting, but it felt cleansing. I pulled my coat tighter around me. I had a meeting in an hour with the executive team at Cobalt Harbor Strategies. I was going to present a new operational workflow that would save them $3 million a year. They treated me with respect. They listened when I spoke. They paid me what I was worth. I walked past a window reflection and caught a glimpse of myself. I didn't look like the tired, frantic woman who had hid in her car to eat a sandwich. I looked like a woman who owned her own life. I thought about Brittany, probably screaming at Gordon right now about the lack of oat milk in his fridge. I thought about Gordon, staring at a spreadsheet he couldn't understand, watching his empire crumble because he was too arrogant to learn how it worked. They deserved each other. I had paid my dues. I had paid my debts. And now, I was closing the account. I stopped at the corner, waiting for the light to change. A thought crossed my mind. A final epitaph for the life I had burned down in North Carolina. Family is not a suicide pact. It is not an obligation to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, and it certainly is not an excuse for someone to sign their name to your life like they are signing a receipt. The light turned green. I stepped off the curb and walked into my future. I didn't look back. There was nothing behind me but ghosts and ashes, and I had a skyline to conquer. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a long journey from that purple living room to the rainy streets of Seattle, and I am grateful you stuck with me until the very end. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Are you listening while driving to work, cooking dinner, or maybe hiding in your car like I used to? Please leave a comment down below and let me know your location and your thoughts on how I handled Gordon and Brittany. If you enjoyed this story of revenge and freedom, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Lily Revenge Stories. Hit that like button to support the video. And smash the hype button so this story can be recommended to more people who might need a little inspiration to stand up for themselves. Until next time, stay strong, keep your boundaries high, and never let anyone paint your walls purple without your permission. Goodbye.